Imperial Year 2024, and people still don't shut the hell up over whether or not Edelgard did the right. Happy 5th anniversary to one of the most notable entries of the mainline Fire Emblem series. For anyone that isn't familiar with the story of Fire Emblem Three Houses, you play as mercenary turned Professor Byleth at Garreg Monastery and their Officers Academy, where you train students of noble and common birth the ways of history, commerce, and military strategy, as you train the next generation to lead the continent of Fodlan. The class you choose to teach can come from one of three nations: the Black Eagle House with students from the Adrestian Empire, the Blue Lions hailing from the Holy Kingdom of Fargus, and the Golden Deer House representing the Leicester Alliance, hence the Three Houses name. In the game story, you make a promise with your students to return to the Academy 5 years later to celebrate the Millennium Festival, commemorating the monastery/school's 1000th anniversary. In honor of the promised day, I decided it was a good time to talk about this game 5 years after its release. Not because Fire Emblem Three Houses doesn't get any attention anymore, or that people have stopped talking about it, but quite the opposite actually. As for better or for worse, to this day people still argue about whether Edelgard was in the right or not to declare war against the Central Church halfway through the game's story. As for what I think, in my honest opinion, Edelgard did. FBI! Clear right! But that's just my opinion. Let's talk about some of the good things the game has to offer, and I'm pretty sure most people can at least agree on. Regardless on our opinions on Edels, I think we can all agree Three Houses is a pretty good game. The gameplay has the right amount of complexity and has so much potential for different character builds, giving so much player creativity and room to experiment, whether it be for maddening runs, least turn count challenges, or having fun with meme builds. And the sheer amount of world building and lore they wrote for this setting, you'd think they were trying to create an entirely new Nintendo IP with its characters and rich history. However, one major flaw that Three Houses has is that the game can be super repetitive. The game has 3 different routes with a lot of repeating maps, repeating objectives, and reuses a lot of music. I'm just kidding, that's the one thing people are actually glad has repeats. And the gameplay does get a bit monotonous after 2 playthroughs, which I do think you need to complete at least 2 of the 3 routes to fully appreciate the story and get multiple perspectives of the war that takes place in the second half of the story. Oh actually wait a minute, there's 3.5 routes because one route can be split into 2 different parts depending on if you meet really specific optional dialogue. Oh, actually wait, this problem's actually worse. It doesn't help that just one route can take roughly 80 hours to play if you do all the main story chapters, the paralogs, monastery activities, optional maps for golden EXP, and this is all assuming you play at a moderate pace on normal difficulty. Once you complete one route and want to play the other routes, you also have to replay the entire first half of the game, which is nearly identical regardless of which house you decide to teach, and your eyes roll back behind your skull as you play the same maps, watch mostly the same cutscenes, and the only new bits of content for each route are the different students you have access to at the beginning of the game. But wait, actually no, because 2 of the 3.5 routes actually involve teaching the same house, and mostly rehashes the same story from another route, with the only difference being who's leading the house, so the repetition ends up feeling way worse than it actually is. Speaking of which group of students you start with at the beginning, there's also the issue of having to choose a house to teach right at the start of every playthrough, essentially locking yourself into a specific route, and the game requiring you to play it all the way through to understand the war phase from just one point of view. Which is fine and all, except... who are you people? Professors Panamint and Manuela let you take the first draft on which house to teach, and you pretty much have to choose solely based on looks and vibes of each house and the students in them. Well, shucks. What if I picked the Black Eagle house first, but as I played the game and continued the story, the mystery of the tragedy of Dusker in the Blue Lion's house, or solving the mystery behind the Immaculate one in the Golden Deer route sounded more interesting. I can either hope they mention them more in the Black Eagle story, or maybe even start the whole game over if I really wanted to see the story unfold right now. I would also like the chance to know the entire student roster, not just focus on the first batch of students I pick. Thankfully, the game does allow you to recruit students from the other houses into your house if you build enough support points with them, and or impress them by meeting specific stat and weapon thresholds that each student is interested in. But you can't do that with the house leaders and most of their second-in-commands. No matter what, they stay in their original house. So even if you don't mind playing just one route for the story, you most likely would need to replay the game to see the students interact with each other more and choose the route that each student originated in. Replaying this game, as good as it is, can be a lot to ask for Three Houses fans, and especially for anyone new that might want to try this game or get into Fire Emblem as a whole. Though looking back on the franchise's history, there may be a solution looking at us in the face that would fix Three Houses' main issue. We simply need to look at another infamous entry in the Fire Emblem franchise, Fire Emblem. As I mentioned a couple seconds ago, another infamous entry in the mainline Fire Emblem series is Fire Emblem Fates. For anyone that isn't familiar with Fire Emblem Fates, you play as Prince/Princess turned Dragon Corrin, who is caught between two sides of a war between two rival kingdoms. The kingdom shrouded in darkness, Nor, and the land bathed in light, Hoshido. Fates is often reviled for its needlessly convoluted story, illogical and over-dramatical characters, and being way too much of a soap opera instead of a serious political commentary, but makes up for it in its presentation, an astounding soundtrack, and as a small but dedicated fanbase who can look over its flaws and appreciate the themes it tried to explore, albeit poorly. Hold on. And much like Three Houses, Fates has a split story with different stories, characters, and maps depending on which version of the game you bought. Though the main difference between Fates and Three Houses is that in Fates, you play through a 6-chapter prologue before deciding which side of the war and family you join. Or don't join, as you pick neither side and uncover who is truly orchestrating the war from behind the shadows of the conflict and hold on. Or pick the 4th option and join the Super Smash Bros. I'm just kidding. But going back to Fire Emblem, Three Houses is split into 2 parts. Part 1's Academy phase is from chapters 1 through 11, and Part 2's War phase consists of 7 through 11 chapters depending on which route you picked. And here I would like to argue Fates did a much better job of creating a split story. Not only by creating a much shorter prologue only needing half as many chapters, but you also have the option to skip the prologue entirely if you start a new file and immediately jump into another path without having to replay the entire opening act. Fates also made sure to get both Nor and Hoshido's perspectives, so if you jive with a specific side more than the other, you would know which story to pick and which side of the war to join. So for a quick recap of what Fates did right, Fates makes sure you get to know both sides of the war, and allow you to decide with each kingdom's characters and philosophy you find more agreeable. Or you can choose to skip the prologue and jump right into playing another route. Oh wait, I fucked up. I only realized you can do this if you bought one version of the game and then downloaded the other version at a discount, but if you choose one physical copy of the game, you can only go with that one route. And just pretend you play Fire Emblem Fates the same way I do. You bought one physical copy, and then downloaded the other version at a discount, and then also got the Revelation route while you're at it, because I totally forgot that's how I did it, and that doesn't apply to everyone unless you bought the special edition bundle at the very beginning of Fates' release that had all versions on it on one physical copy. Why the fuck didn't they just make that the default everywhere? So here's my proposal. Not only do I want an option to skip all of part 1 if I wanted and begin a new session right at the Wars phase, I also want to spend the entire Academy phase in part 1 with students from all 3 houses simultaneously. With the current way the game is set up, you pick the house of students to teach at the beginning of the game and essentially lock yourself into a specific story route. So instead of teaching a single class, I would like to be able to play a chapter with each house, rotating which house you teach every chapter, as you get to know the entire roster before cementing which house to focus on, and which route you end up choosing during the war phase. Part 1 has 11 chapters that can be split between the 3 houses, and I would even throw in a few chapters where you can choose which house to teach if you liked a particular house and wanted to train and use them more, so that they gain more experience and class experience. As a tentative list, here are the chapters I think each house should be assigned to. Chapters 1 and 2, you pick which house to play since it's pretty much more tutorial maps. Chapter 3, Mutiny in the Mist has you lead in the Blue Lions, since it's the chapter Lonato appears and would be important to Ash. Chapter 4, the Goddess's Rite of Rebirth has the Black Eagles, because of Eddles and Hubert having special dialogue with the Death Knight. Chapter 5. Tower of Black Winds has the Blue Alliance again, since it's a chapter important to Sylvain and Annette. Chapter 6. Rumors of a Reaper has the Golden Deer make their guaranteed debut for a funny Lysithea moment. Chapter 7. Field of the Eagle and Lion allows you to choose which house to lead, since this map is essentially a massive three-way battle between the houses. Chapter 8. The Flame of the Darkness has the Black Eagles, since Edelgard has unique dialogue with Solon and the Death Knight, and would explain how the Flame Emperor was there. Chapter 9. The Cause of Sorrow allows you to pick which house to lead during this month because of the dance competition where you choose which of your students becomes the dancer, and the promise to return 5 years later should be done with your favorite house of choice. Chapter 10. Where the Goddess Dwells has the Golden Deer, since Leonie has unique dialogue against Cronia, and I think Leonie would want to help Byleth avenge Gerald's death most out of the whole cast. Chapter 11. Throne of Knowledge is the final chapter in Part 1, and this allows you to choose which house to lead, and decide which route you take in Part 2, the War Phase. There would also be plenty of warnings letting you know that this is where you make your decision and commit to a specific path. If you start another playthrough and wanted to skip Part 1, this is where the new file would start you as you select which house to lead and join their side during Part 2. With the way I have divided the chapters, each house has 2 guaranteed chapters to play, and the player has 4 chapters to select a house to lead for that map, and a final chapter to play at the road split before moving on to Part 2. The greatest benefit to doing this rotating class idea is that you get a chance to meet the entire student body while getting more of their perspectives and sample their particular story routes before making a final decision. I think after you spend 11 chapters with everyone, you will be able to make an informed decision and move on to the war phase supporting the characters you most resonate with. But wait, wouldn't splitting Part 1 between the 3 houses divide the EXP and class experience that each student is supposed to receive? Wouldn't it also be way more difficult to accumulate supports when your attention is being split between all the students and making them weaker overall? Shit, I didn't think about that. Okay, students have their starting weapon ranks much higher, everyone gets the aptitude skill, and gain way more EXP and support points during the academy phase. We'll just call this a duct tape solution, and maybe I'll come back to this in a later video. But as a whole, my rehouses idea allows you to spend way more time to get to know the entire cast. Students now gain EXP, weapon rank, and support points much faster, and it allows you to skip Part 1 on repeat playthroughs if ever you don't want to play through the whole thing again. As much as I enjoyed the monastery activities, it does get a bit repetitive, so if I could find a way to make it go much faster, or even skip it entirely if I don't feel like playing that part of the game again, I think that would make everyone's lives a lot better. As a final summary, Fire Emblem Three Houses is a great game full of many fantastic characters and world building that allows for a vast amount of creativity and experimentation, but can become a major time commitment if you want to gain a broader perspective of the overall picture, and the first half of each route is painfully repetitive. My new proposal should make Part 1 go by much faster, and give a wider view of the entire cast and understand their individual character arcs. Or give the option to skip Part 1 entirely should you desire to jump immediately into Part 2 and play all the game's routes that way. Normally I would spell a call to action asking for likes and a subscribe, but today is different. I just want to see you talk more about Fire Emblem Three Houses in the comments. A couple of discussion examples would be, who do you think would bring the best future for Fodlan? Not who is your favorite, what are some underrated ships you wish to share? Or who do you think would lead each nation should Eddles, Dimdum, and Clawdbar all manage to die or disappear? That one is definitely not a video idea I came up with while writing this. Fuck, I want to talk more about Fire Emblem. Okay, that was everything I wanted to say. Thank you for the watch, and have a good day, bye!